I didn't believe in Skinwalkers or any of the local folklore when I first set foot in northern Arizona. I'm the kind of person who prefers facts, GPS coordinates, and maps over campfire stories. I'm outdoorsy, sure, but I like trails, marked paths, and a tent I can zip closed tightly. So when my buddy Matt suggested we spend a week backpacking in the Kaibab National Forest, deep into the pines, I was excited but skeptical. His pitch was simple. No cell service, no crowds, just the wilderness. Perfect, I thought. We left Flagstaff mid-morning. The trailhead was quiet. Just the occasional crow and the wind sifting through the tall pines. The forest smelled like resin and damp earth. A smell I'd always associated with being truly alone, away from people and civilization. We carried standard gear, tents, sleeping bags, stove, and enough food for a week. No one else was around. I liked it that way. The first 2 days were uneventful, maybe a little boring. We hiked, set up camp near a small creek, made campfires, and joked around. I noticed a few oddities, like the birds stopping mid-flight to just watch us, or the deer freezing and staring at us from hundreds of feet away, but chalked it up to normal wilderness behavior. Animals get curious. I didn't think much of it. It was late on the third night, around 2:45 a.m., when the first thing that made me pause happened. I was already half asleep in my tent when I heard a snap, like a branch breaking about 50 feet away. Matt stirred beside me. Probably just a raccoon, I whispered. But the sound wasn't the typical crack of small animal movement. It was deliberate heavy, like something larger. Something standing upright, snapping branches to mark a path or territory. I sat up, straining my eyes against the blackness. The moon was thin, a crescent, so shadows swallowed everything beyond the immediate circle of our small lantern. I could hear breathing. At first, I thought it was Matt. He was moving around in his sleeping bag. But then I realized the breathing was not his. It was slower, heavier, and deliberate. I froze. My stomach dropped. I told myself it was a coyote, maybe a bobcat, something natural. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw movement between the trees. 2 small pinpricks of light reflected back at me. Eyes. Not deer eyes, not a reflective animal. 2 round, yellowish points fixed on me. I nudged Matt. Due to eyes. He squinted into the darkness. What? Where? I pointed, keeping my voice low. There. Just staring. Matt whispered a nervous laugh. Probably a hiker. Flashlight caught in a tree. I didn't think so. These eyes weren't moving like a human scanning. They were locked, unblinking, and calculating. I didn't breathe. Neither did Matt. And then, just like that, they vanished. The next day, I convinced myself it was paranoia, maybe the altitude, the isolation messing with my mind. But as we hiked deeper into the forest, I began noticing more subtle signs. Our trail would suddenly be littered with broken sticks arranged in a way that looked intentional. Occasionally, we'd hear heavy footsteps off the trail, following us, then stop whenever we stopped. Birds would go silent abruptly. Even the creek seemed quieter in patches, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. By the 4th night, I was on edge. We set up camp in a small clearing, the pines densely packed around us. I kept watch while Matt went to gather firewood. Around 11:30 p.m., the wind dropped, and an unnatural silence took over the clearing. It was the kind of silence that presses on your ears, the forest holding its breath in anticipation. Then I heard a low whistle, almost a human imitation, coming from the tree line. It wasn't a bird, not any animal I've ever heard. The whistle was broken, jagged, and carried a tone of curiosity. Then another sound followed. something between a growl and a chuckle, like it was mimicking a human sound without fully understanding it. Matt returned, and I told him. He brushed it off, but I could tell he was nervous. That night, sleep came in small fragments. Every time I drifted off, I'd wake to the sound of something moving just beyond the firelight. I never saw it, but I could feel it, the presence of something humanoid, but not human. Around 3:00 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps circling our tents. I held my breath. The soft crunch of pine needles underfoot, deliberate, methodical. It stopped at the edge of our clearing, just beyond the fire's glow. I risked a glance. A tall, thin figure stood between two pines, perfectly still, watching. Its head tilted unnaturally, as if studying me. I whispered Matt's name. No response. I considered shaking him awake, but a strange instinct held me back. I didn't want to draw attention. The figure tilted its head further and then vanished, like a shadow absorbing itself into the darkness. By sunrise, I was exhausted, my nerves raw. I knew we couldn't stay. I told Matt I wanted to pack up and leave immediately. He agreed silently, eyes darting to the tree line one last time before we broke camp. The hike out was tense. Every rustle in the underbrush, every snap of a twig, I flinched. By the time we reached the car, I felt hollowed out. Safe, but not relieved. Back in Flagstaff, I tried to rationalize it. Bears. No, the behavior was too deliberate. Hunters. Maybe, but no gunshots, no human voices. Local folklore mentions skinwalkers. Shapeshifters, tricksters, hunters of humans. I scoffed at the idea, but the memory of those eyes, unblinking and intelligent, lingered. I don't think I'll ever go back. I tell myself it was just a combination of stress, isolation, and imagination. But deep down, I know something in those pines watched me, studied me, and knew exactly where I was at all times. I just hope it never decides to follow me beyond the forest. Even now, months later, I wake to the sound of subtle footsteps outside my window. I tell myself it's just the wind, just the neighborhood animals. But part of me knows better. I'm no longer skeptical. I've always considered myself rational, level-headed, not superstitious. I don't believe in ghosts, demons, or cryptids. But what happened to me in the Blue Ridge Mountains last October, well, I'm not so sure anymore. I was part of a small group, 3 friends from college, who decided to do a long weekend, hike along the Appalachian Trail, specifically in an area known for its isolation and thick, old-growth forests. Our plan was simple: backpack, camp, enjoy the fall foliage. The higher elevations had already started to turn crimson and gold, and the air was crisp with that unmistakable autumn chill. We set out Friday morning, starting from a trailhead near Roanoke, Virginia. I was carrying the standard pack: tent, stove, food, and extra layers. My friends, Eric and Dan, were slightly less organized, but nothing alarming. The first day was uneventful. We hiked, joked, took pictures, and pitched our tent near a small creek as night fell. The forest was quiet, save for the constant whisper of wind through the oaks and maples. I first noticed something was off the following night. Around 1:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of snapping branches. Not directly on our trail, but somewhere above the ridge, maybe 200 yards away. Eric was still snoring. Dan's side of the tent was silent. The snapping continued intermittently, with a rhythm that felt almost deliberate. I dismissed it as deer or raccoon activity, but my gut said otherwise. Something about the sound was off. The next morning, I mentioned it to Eric while we were cooking breakfast. "Probably just a deer," he said, laughing. "Or a bear checking us out." Dan shrugged. I wanted to believe them, but as we hiked further along the trail, I began noticing subtle signs that made me uneasy. Small, broken sticks appeared along the trail ahead, arranged in a manner that seemed intentional. Sometimes, we'd notice paw prints, but they weren't quite right. Too large for a dog or coyote, yet not exactly human. They were elongated, narrow, and had an odd claw-like impression at the tips. By the second night, the forest had grown denser. We camped in a small clearing just beyond a ridge, the valley below shrouded in mist. I volunteered to keep watch while my friends settled in. Around 2:45 a.m., I heard it a whisper, low and indistinct, like someone calling a name in the distance. I froze, straining to listen. The voice sounded human, but broken, almost garbled, echoing through the trees. "Hello?" I called softly. No answer. Only silence. Thick and oppressive. Then another sound. Something moving through the underbrush. Deliberate. Careful, circling the clearing. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it toward the tree line. Nothing. But then, for a brief instant, I thought I saw a shadow. Tall, thin, moving upright. Not quite human, slipping behind a tree. I woke my friends. Eric laughed nervously, saying it was probably the wind or an animal. Dan looked pale, uneasy. We tried to settle down, but the tension lingered. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined shapes moving between the trees, watching. I felt it most when I glanced toward the ridge above us. The trees there seemed wrong, crooked, twisted in ways they shouldn't be. Around 3:15 a.m., I woke again. This time, there was no mistaking it. A figure was standing at the edge of the clearing. Tall, impossibly thin, with glowing eyes that reflected the faint light of our dying fire. It didn't move, but its presence was undeniable. I froze, heart hammering. My instincts screamed to run, but some deep, primal part of me held me in place. Then the whisper came again, closer this time. Not a word I could understand. Just sounds. Broken syllables, mocking, like someone attempting to mimic speech. I looked around frantically, and the figure had disappeared. I swear it didn't run or walk. It simply vanished, blending with the shadows of the forest. By sunrise, I was exhausted and jittery. My friends hadn't seen the figure. They didn't hear the whispers. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, a hallucination brought on by lack of sleep and isolation. But the broken sticks arranged near our tent, and the paw-like prints around the clearing, those were real. The third day of hiking was tense. Every rustle in the leaves made me flinch. Birds were eerily absent. Even the small creek we crossed seemed unnaturally quiet, the water moving silently over rocks that should have made noise. By late afternoon, we found a small ridge with a view of the valley below and decided to rest. While Eric took photos, I wandered slightly off trail. That's when I first noticed the faint tracks leading deeper into the forest. I called Dan and Eric over. They shrugged, but I felt a cold weight in my chest. The tracks were elongated, humanoid, and perfectly spaced. It was as if something, or someone, was following us, always just beyond sight. That night, we tried to sleep in the tents, but none of us rested. Around 3:50 a.m., I was woken by a guttural noise. Not a growl, not a scream, but somewhere in between. Something walked around our tents. I grabbed my flashlight, shone it toward the sound, and caught movement between the trees. Two figures, elongated, unnatural, circling. Their eyes reflected back at me, golden and intelligent. I woke my friends. We scrambled to pack and decided to hike out immediately. Following the trail down the ridge, the descent was slow and tense. Every snap of a branch, every rustle in the brush made me jump. Eric swore he saw shapes in the distance, just at the edge of the mist. Dan stopped at one point, pale, muttering that he felt like we were being watched. I couldn't argue. I felt it too. By the time we reached the trailhead, safe in the light of late morning, I was shaking. I kept glancing back toward the ridge, expecting to see those figures watching us. But there was nothing. Only the trees, silent and indifferent. I've tried to rationalize it since then. Maybe we saw wild animals. Maybe I hallucinated due to exhaustion. But the whispers, the tracks, the deliberate snapping of branches, and those eyes, they weren't anything natural. I haven't hiked alone since. The forest calls to me in memories, reminding me that something intelligent, deliberate, and inhuman roams the Blue Ridge, watching, waiting. I can't explain it, and I don't think I ever will. I used to scoff at stories of shapeshifters or skinwalkers. Not anymore. I'm not a believer. Never have been. Ghosts, cryptids, shapeshifters. Call it what you want. I like evidence, trails, photographs, logical explanations. But after what happened on the Hollow Trail, in the remote wilderness of western Utah, I don't know what to think anymore. I don't tell this story lightly, because it sounds insane, but it's true. Every word. I was 27, an avid hiker and outdoorsman. My friend Kyle and I decided to take a 4-day backpacking trip along a lesser-known section of the Hollow Trail, a ridge trail that winds through dense conifers, scrubland, and jagged cliffs. We wanted isolation, distance from cell service, nothing but the wilderness. The first day was pleasant, if uneventful. Crisp air, the smell of pine sap and damp earth, a light wind rustling through the trees. We set up camp in a small clearing near a creek, cooked, and drank coffee around the fire. Kyle told me he'd read some local legends about the area. Shapeshifters, skinwalkers, spirits. But I brushed it off. Scary stories to sell postcards, I said. By nightfall, the forest changed. Sounds that were once distant now felt unnervingly close. The usual chorus of insects and nocturnal animals was muted, replaced by an oppressive silence. Around 1:20 a.m., I heard a soft, deliberate snap. Not a branch breaking under weight, but a controlled, precise snap, like something was testing the ground near us. Kyle stirred. "What was that?" he whispered. "Probably a deer," I said, more to reassure myself than him. But my voice felt hollow. The second night, things got stranger. Around 3:05 a.m., I woke to a low, guttural whisper just beyond our firelight. I couldn't understand the words, but it sounded almost human, distorted, wrong in a way that made the hairs on my arms stand up. My flashlight revealed nothing, only trees twisted in the darkness. But the air felt heavy, as if something was pressing against me from the shadows. I didn't sleep after that. I lay in my sleeping bag listening. Every rustle, every snapping twig, made me flinch. Around 3:50 a.m., I thought I saw movement at the edge of the clearing. Something tall, thin, hunched, but moving upright. It didn't step like a human, didn't run like a deer. It moved fluidly, unnaturally, with intent. Its eyes, if I can call them that, caught the light of our dying fire, golden and intelligent. Kyle didn't wake. I didn't call him. There was an instinctual terror in me, telling me that any interaction might provoke it. I stayed perfectly still, pretending to sleep, listening to its presence shift from one side of the clearing to the other. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The following day, I noticed subtle signs I hadn't seen before. Rocks near the creek were stacked into crude patterns. Broken branches aligned unnaturally along our trail, and like prints with elongated toes that didn't match any animal I knew. Every sense screamed that we were being tracked. On the third night, the encounter escalated. Around 20:30 a.m., I woke to Kyle muttering in his sleep. I turned on my flashlight and froze. Two figures were standing at the edge of the clearing. Tall, elongated, unnervingly thin, watching us. One tilted its head in a grotesque imitation of curiosity. The other stepped forward, a motion so fluid and silent it made no sound, yet the presence pressed against me like a weight. I whispered Kyle's name. No response. I considered shaking him awake, but a cold instinct stopped me. I didn't want them to notice movement beyond my own. For what felt like hours, I watched, heart hammering, unable to move. The first figure let out a whisper again. Garbled, broken, unintelligible, but unmistakably deliberate. The second figure moved slightly, then vanished into the tree line, as if absorbed by the darkness itself. By sunrise, we packed in silence. Kyle didn't seem to notice anything. We descended the ridge quickly, constantly scanning the forest edges, but saw nothing. Yet I felt their eyes on me, the entire way down, their intelligence and intent palpable, their presence lingering long after the visual encounter ended. Back in civilization, I tried rational explanations. Animals, shadows, exhaustion. But the stacked rocks, the aligned branches, the elongated prints, they couldn't be hallucinations. I began to notice small things in daily life afterward: shadows flicking at the corner of my eye, faint noises outside my window at night, footsteps in the hallway when no one was home. I know some will dismiss this as paranoia, but I've stopped hiking alone. I can't. And I can't stop thinking about that hollow trail, that ridge, the watching, that sense of being studied by something inhuman, intelligent, and patient. I am no longer skeptical. And if you ever find yourself in the deep, remote forests of the American West, listen to the silence, watch the shadows, and respect the unseen. Because some things aren't just legends. Some things are real, and they watch. Always.